Okay, so without further ado, let's welcome the man of the moment, Ben Ulrich, is it? Ulrich. So Ben is from the US, but he lives all over the world. Please.
So just a quick thing about me. Like you said, my name is Ben Ulrich. I was born in the US. I've been living in Mexico for the last few years, and I am currently here mostly working on ATMs. So if you've used the ATMs around here, I've fixed them or have set up the new ones that are going in. I've been in Bitcoin since the end of 2013, or the end of 2012, when I set up the Bitcoin meetups in Denver. It's one of the biggest groups in the U.S. right now, and I've been hacking and making websites since elementary school. So I've been doing all this a long time. I'm completely self-taught. I did not go to college. I barely attended high school. So all this information is stuff that I learned by talking to people and by going to events, reading online, so on and so forth. So all this information is freely available and out there. And this presentation it's a thing called MindMeister. It's going to be online. You can find it. It's a mind map thing. I use it a lot, so I thought I'd just do it in this to make things simpler for me. So, like he said, we're going to talk about modern digital security, and this is basic security. This is personal security, not for enterprise. I'm not going to talk about how to secure your websites or servers or all that kind of stuff. That's a whole different thing. It takes a lot of schooling and technical knowledge and so on and so forth, and frankly, we just don't have time for it. So what is hacking today? So hacking today is pretty much the same things you've always heard of, malware, social engineering, like all the common stuff where you see the exploit scripts that they do in the movies, and all that stuff still exists today. It's just evolved to become more complex and more difficult for everybody involved, not just the people that are trying to protect against it, but also the people that are going after it. Malware, like security stuff, you notice we don't really get viruses anymore that like take over your computer and shut it down and do hundreds and thousands of pop-ups. That still happens, but it's not very often. So what the malware we see today is mostly things that just sit in the background and wait. Essentially today we have three types of hacking. We have the type of hacking that happens in person, and we have the type of hacking that hacks your device, your phone, your laptop, and then we have the kind of hacking that happens on servers, like when people hack Target and steal thousands or millions of credit card information. We have every day these kind of things happen. People are taking down servers, exploiting your information, and literally uploading it to the dark web for other people to look through and check out what they want to do, so on and so forth. So with that, how we defend against it, there's security, functionality, and ease of use. So if you want to be the most secure, you have to sacrifice ease of use and functionality. If you want to be very easy to use, you have to sacrifice security and functionality. So there is no perfect solution for securing yourself. Hey, you got it. So somewhere, for most people, you want to be somewhere in here. For people like me that have been in Bitcoin a long time and have a lot of digital properties, websites, and stuff being hosted, I have to go towards the side that it gets really annoying. And then, where my mom is and where most people are is down here, where it's easier to use, where it's not going to impede in their daily life. And quite honestly, that's fine for most people, because if you're not a target, what difference does it make? If you're not browsing the forums that say, I'm looking to invest money, that's where other people that are looking to steal your money hang out, looking for you. So, yeah, first off, it's just pay attention, because a lot of the things are pretty simple and obvious if you're looking, because a lot of people decide to trust Google, and when a Google ad pops up and says, hi, I'm such and such company, they believe it, and they click on that ad. And that ad doesn't necessarily lead to where you think it does, and it steals your information. The second big thing is using good passwords. The days of using, your family names, your old dogs, your cars, your first and last name, your birth year, any of that stuff, if that's in your password, it is unsecure. Do not use that for any reason, for any passwords at all. And furthermore, we'll go into this, but you have to have 12 characters and so on and so forth. And then the third thing, if you're not using, is two-factor. And two-factor is super, super important because it's really your last line of defense. If somebody does get access to your password, if somebody does get access to your computer, then the only thing stopping them from accessing your accounts is two-factor authentication. And there's a few different types of that, and if you're using phone two-factor authentication and you think it's secure, like getting a text message, and you think it's secure, it's not. In fact, many times it can open you up to further attacks and actually make it easier to break into your account. All right, so let's talk about the different kinds of hacking and what you can do specifically to prevent it. So these first ones are what I consider like movie types of hacking and what shows up in the news. The big news stories that, you know, like I was talking about before, back, 4 years ago when Target had a huge breach and literally hundreds of thousands, if it might have been 1 million people lost all their information. Like all the information they put into Target system got exposed. Their birthdays, if they applied for cards, their social security, all kinds of stuff. So these kinds of hacks are the ones you hear about most of the time, though they aren't the kinds of hacks that actually affect us on a day-to-day basis and prevent you from living your life and using your bank accounts, so on and so forth. So the first one is, honestly, it's not really a hack, but it still happens more than you think, is just leaving your account logged in, like going to a computer cafe and then signing into your Facebook account, your bank account, so on and so forth, and not clicking log out when you leave. I don't know if you can even call that a hack, but I put it in there because if you are going to these places, you are using public computers, definitely make sure you use an incognito window or like a private browsing window, and also make sure you specifically log out of every account that you log into. Otherwise, you are leaving potential chance for exposure. All right. The second kind of attacks that we're going to talk about is man-in-the-middle attacks. So man-in-the-middle attacks happen in a broad range of ways, but the way that it affects most people is through Wi-Fi. And how this works is if you have unsecured Wi-Fi, it is fairly easy for anybody that wants to set up a receiver to read all the information that's going around in the air and just read it, like pick it from it. I mean, they can't see it, it's not in clear text, but you get enough information. You spend 10, 20, 30, 45 minutes looking at this information. You can decrypt it, you can figure out what they're doing, you can steal their information. And this goes even further with honeypots. Something that's actually happening a lot these days is people are going and hacking coffee shops' Wi-Fi. Now, they're not making it so you can't use the Wi-Fi. They're just routing all the traffic through their servers so that, again, they can just see pretty much everything you're doing over time. And it's not the coffee shop's fault, except for they were, negligent in their security. The coffee shop's not actually hacking you. It is somebody intentionally, like, standing, literally a man in the middle, standing in between where your computer is and where your data is going, and vice versa. So the easiest way to do this is you just protect yourself with a VPN. A VPN means that if you are at an airport, if you are at a coffee shop, no matter if it is a honeypot scenario where they set up a Wi-Fi specifically hoping you use it even though it works, or it's just an open network where anybody can kind of have a chance to read your data, a VPN takes care of it. There are a lot of options for VPNs. The VPN that I use and okay, there it goes. The VPN that I use and the one, they actually decided to send us some codes, so you've got some way we're going to distribute those codes for some free months of VPN, is private internet access. The reason I recommend them and I use them myself is because they use all the modern security protocols. They accept Bitcoin if you use that, and they make it really easy to use it on your phone, your computer. You can use it on 5 devices at once. They don't charge you anything extra. So I use this all the time, even when I'm on mobile data, Wi-Fi, my home internet, doesn't matter. I always use a VPN. You can obviously create your own VPN. There's tons of tutorials online. It only takes about 15 to 30 minutes if you're somewhat experienced with computers. Creating a VPN is a good idea, but a lot of times it's more trouble than it's worth, and it leaves you only one option to connect. So for me, when I travel, if I'm in the US, I can use a US-based server, so I'm not, my data's not traveling that far. And if I'm in Mexico, I can use a Mexican-based server, and while I'm here, I use Singapore or Hong Kong, or there's a ton of different places around here. I can use VPNs that aren't too far away, that's not going to impede my speed and internet availability. If you do your own VPN, you kind of have to stay around your server, otherwise you're going to have like really bad internet experience due to lag times and speed. There's tons of other good VPNs, and like I said, this is all online. This is actually a link, so if you go to this presentation, there's a link that has a list of like hundreds of other VPNs that you can use. The only thing I would say is never, ever, ever use a free VPN. It is not free. And my friend actually reminded me of a quote that I heard a long time ago, which is, if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. So these free VPNs, they could be stealing your information outright. They could be replacing advertisements that Google would normally give you with their own advertisements. They could be doing any number of 100 other things that are just not good. So do not use free VPNs. That is almost as bad, if not worse, than actually just like not using a VPN at all. And VPNs completely take care of the problem of that man-in-the-middle attack in the scenario of bad Wi-Fi actors. All right, so this is what he was actually talking about like the basic security check, and it still hasn't come up yet. But so we touched base a little bit on that when I started, which is big data exposure. Dropbox has been hacked a couple times in the last few years. I mean, we could just list these all day long. There's a couple websites that actually do, and there's this website, Have I Been Pwned? If you go in there and you type in your email address, it will actually search all of the open available databases that have been uploaded to the dark web, that have been uploaded to the dark spaces on the internet. It'll search those for your email address to see which information has been exposed by what websites over the last X amount of years. I don't know exactly how long it goes back. But this is the easiest way to see if you've actually have like a very obvious breach in your security where somebody for sure has your password, or somebody for sure has your birthday or your social security number or your ID number, or anything like that. So this was actually created by the guy who made LastPass and some other guys, but this is a great resource. I definitely recommend everybody put their email into it. Understand this is only going to work if you put the email in you use for things. Like if you don't sign up with that email, it's not going to show up because you haven't used it to sign up for services like Reddit and Dropbox and Microsoft and Google and all that kind of stuff. So definitely make sure to check that out. And if you want to see this is website hacks in real time. It honestly has no educational value, but it is kind of scary looking because the dots just keep popping up continuously. And then this is all the biggest data breaches and hacks that include like what's supposed to be safe information that hospitals are storing, and medical records, all that kind of stuff as well. So definitely take a look at that if you can, which will show which other potential places you have been exposed. So how do we deal with these kind of exposures where it's not really your fault and the some company has leaked your information? And the simple answer to that is, wow, it did not show up correctly on my computer either. It doesn't really matter. Passwords. So good passwords versus bad passwords and the like. So I've got a few examples of passwords here. These are all bad passwords. You can see this is my name, and my birth year, and my first and last name, my first car. Any lines from your favorite movies, poems, books, people seem to like to use that. Those are not secure. People, you just use what's called a dictionary database, and they search all that first, rather than trying 111111111 and then switching 1111112. They try all the known information. They try the top list of like 1 million most used passwords, and they try the top 20 or 100,000 books and the top 100,000 movies. They do all that first because it's easier, and it's not just random guessing, and it takes a lot of, because this works a lot of the times. You'd be surprised how many people And if you search top 100, top 1,000 passwords, you'll find passwords that you've used before. Everybody does. Because it just seems like the obvious choice, and that's why they're in there. So take a look at that resource. Definitely don't use those passwords. And this one, you'll see this one. This one looks secure, okay? And it is. This password is a secure password. It is randomly generated, and it has more than 12 characters, and it would be very difficult to crack. The reason this is a bad password, though, is because this is no more random than an easy-to-read password, and, well, it's not significantly more random than an easy-to-read password, and it's a real pain in the butt. And as far as that triangle that we were talking about before, if we're giving up a tiny bit of security for a lot of ease of use. So you'll see with these next set of passwords, they are randomly generated sets of words. So these randomly generated sets of words are easy to read. So if I have the password database on my phone and I want to type it in my computer, I'm not checking every character to see what the next character is. I read 4 or 5 words, I type in 4 or 5 words. It's that simple. And that way you can do 20, 30 character passwords much quicker than you could do a 5-character password. And on top of that, it's still random. The chances of them guessing this password is super high. The only people that get through these kind of passwords with brute force attacks are the governments. And honestly, there's nothing you can do to stop governments of any kind from getting into your accounts. And if you have a way, let me know, because I haven't heard of one, and even the most secure people I know also say the same thing. So this is the kind of password that I use for everything. You can throw in numbers, periods, commas, @ signs. That's all great, but there's no reason to make it completely unreadable. Human readable passwords are just as hard for a computer to guess as non-human readable passwords, or almost as hard. We're talking about when you're talking about having to do billions of guesses or hundreds of millions of guesses, giving up 10,000 guesses is worth the ease of use here, because at that point you're not at risk to being brute force attacked, except for, like I said, by governments. So how do you remember all these passwords? You don't. That's the simple truth of it. You don't want to. If you can remember all of your passwords for 100 accounts that you have or 200 accounts you have, they are not good passwords. Unless you've got a crazy memory. And there's some people that do, great, but I don't, and most people don't, so you need to use a password manager. These are the password managers that I recommend, LastPass and KeePass. LastPass is like the standard for the majority of people that use password managers. It keeps your password database online in the cloud, but they don't keep the key for you. So if you lose the key, well, you can have them keep it for you if you want. It's up to you whether you want to give them that permission. But that way, you're not responsible for storing your password database. And also, because LastPass is a service that is, it's freemium, so you can use it for free for personal use, and then you pay for it if you want to use it for business and that kind of thing. Because it is a service, they keep up to date. They're on the black hat, they're on the dark websites, watching for the new exploits, watching for the new password database dumps, knowing what these people are doing to hack into password managers, to break encryption. They're on the cutting edge of this. So it's their responsibility to keep this updated, and it stays very well updated. I know a lot of people that use LastPass, and honestly, I recommend it to everybody. LastPass is a great, great solution. If you feel like you want to be more secure, or if you feel like you want to take the risk of managing your own password database, you can use KeePass. It uses the exact same encryptions, but the only real difference is that KeePass gives you more options if you want to use them, and also KeePass means it's open source, you have to keep your own database. So some people upload it to Dropbox or Drive or whatever. If you want to do that, fine. But if you're using KeePass, you probably should just be, keeping it on a secure device anyway. It does complicate things significantly, but as long as you keep it up to date, it is slightly more secure and potentially harder to hack than with LastPass. All right. So, and this is actually a video, if you want to watch it later, from those same guys at Security Weekly about rolling your own password manager. If you want to try and figure out the math and the programming and all that stuff that goes behind protecting your passwords yourself, then you can do that. And I think it's a great experiment. I think it's something, for me as a nerd, it's something interesting to do and learn about. But it was not something that I wanted to continue because it completely removes the ease of use, like, out of the picture at all. So totally not worth it for me. Even the most secure people I know don't do this because from literally what they tell me is that if a password is so important that you can't securely store it in KeePass or LastPass, then you should just remember it yourself, because the difficulty of rolling your own security and then keeping it up to date and monitoring all that stuff is impossible for any normal person to keep up with. So just don't bother. But if you want to do it as an experiment so you understand how all this stuff works, definitely do it. It's worth the time. It may take you a couple days though, because the cryptography math behind it is ridiculously complicated. All right. So on to malware. Everybody knows about malware, but like I said, the malware today doesn't really work like the malware that we've all remember in the late 90s and the early 2000s, where it was just tons of pop-ups and ridiculous things all over the place all the time. The majority of malware today now is one of two things. It's either a copy-paste changer, which means it actually takes, when you copy everything, it pays attention to everything you copy. It looks for bank accounts, routing numbers, blockchain like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum addresses. It looks for all of that, and as soon as it finds one, it quickly swaps it out. And some of these will integrate it into your email, so it even swaps it out before you read the email. The only way to really protect yourself against these is, well, there's two things you need to do, which is double check when you copy and paste like any type of address. Double check that the first few characters and the last few characters are correct. They're not creating those things on the fly, so it's not going to be similar. It's almost definitely not going to be similar to what you were expecting. So you just got to, you're not going to look at all 32 characters of a Bitcoin address. So just check the first three and the last three, and that's secure enough. The only other thing with those kind of attacks that you can do is keep your everything up to date. The majority, there's a question in the back. The majority of updates that you see your Adobe and your computer and your phone are security updates and bug updates. So even if it doesn't protect you from a potential hack, it is preventing you from losing data because of a crash. So always try and keep everything up to date. That's pretty much the only way you can defend against that. And then keyloggers are about the same. They just monitor everything you type in and then send it back to the database for further analysis later.
What do you think about ENS?
ENS.
For Ethereum, instead of using the addresses, you use names, just like ENS?
Yeah, ENS. Okay, so you mean in like this situation?
Yeah, in context, because addresses are very hard to keep track of.
Right.
So if it's a name.
Sure. I mean, with ENS, I think the reason it hasn't, at least with the crypto community, it hasn't taken on is because you give up like a large chunk of anonymity with having an address like that. As far as something like this, it can be valuable, but the problem with that is it tends to make people complacent. And for instance, one of the things we're going to talk about real soon is phishing websites. And phishing websites are real good about changing a lowercase l with a capital I. So it looks like the same thing, but it's not. And that's one of the really big potential issues we have with those kind of names. Even if they are hard to generate, eventually you could, and then make it easier to defraud people. Is that kind of your question? Or?
Something else to mention also with the ENS was I think recently an article that where they kind of replaced addresses then that you can't even see, not just with a capital I and L, by just changing the spacing basically, so that it's not visible at all to
Oh, I
you
can
really
see
what's going on there, because they just have the spacing, like it's the space between these letters, but they change it, okay, make it half a space or something, you actually have two spaces, but you can't see it really.
So that's even worse.
You copy paste it somewhere else and really check if there's two spaces actually between the letters. So it can be as well.
So I guess in answer to your question, it makes that problem worse.
You could generate vanity addresses, then it'd be very hard for malware to reach the establishment.
But if you're like a big company bringing in lots of money and using the same address for a long enough period, then it's only, I mean, everything is hackable, right? So it's the amount of money that it takes to do so. And once that becomes, once those two values align, once the amount of money that it takes to do that aligns with the amount of, gain from that, it's a problem. But you're right, it is very difficult to generate the same vanity address, but it is still possible. And all right, on to social engineering. Now, this I feel is the biggest problem of hacking with people today, because social engineering is realistically more devastating, or at least in recent history, it has been more devastating to people losing money. I know personally of people, like big people in the Bitcoin industry, that have lost, well, now it's multiple millions worth of dollars, but over 2 months ago when it was happening a lot, it was just like $1 million worth of Bitcoin between 5 people that should have known better via social engineering. So this is not like, if you don't know about this kind of stuff, it's not a big deal, because even a lot of the big Bitcoin people, like Connie Galippi, actually, she didn't lose any money. She runs BitGive, which is like the biggest Bitcoin charity foundation, and she recently had this happen. And unlike a lot of the other people that I saw that had the social engineering tactic happen to them, she actually got ahead of it and didn't actually lose anything. But it could have been a much, much worse thing. So before I get into these, the social engineering thing that I was talking about was with phone numbers. And this happens more in the US, and it's starting to happen more in Europe. And I don't know about Asia, if anybody's heard about this happening in Asia, but what happens is they call your telephone provider and they pretend to be you, and they say, hey, I lost my phone. I think somebody stole it. I need to shut it down and move it to my new phone so I can access everything again. And they say, okay, sir, what's the last 4 digits of your social security? And they bought that ahead of time online. Or they just say, I don't know. And they proceed to the next question. Or I'd have to look it up. They proceed to the next question, which is your mother's maiden name, your dog, the house you grew up on, your old phone number, all these questions that we use to recover accounts. Most of this information can be found today. And if it can't be found, they can do targeted phishing to find it out from you. So we're going to talk about phishing in just a moment. But that way they transfer the number, and if you're using SMS two-factor on the phone, then for instance, if you lose your password on Google or PayPal, PayPal says, okay, we're going to send you a text message on your phone. Just put that in and you can reset your password, right? So if they get access to your phone, they can reset your Gmail account a lot of times, your PayPal. If you're using Authy and you have two-factor to your phone set up with Authy, they can even get into your Authy account, which is your last line of defense. So definitely make sure, and we're going to talk about it in the next section, that you're not using unsecured phones for two-factor authentication. I don't know about Vietnamese phones. I don't know about the Asian countries. I would love to publish some specific information if somebody has it about that. So here we've got government ID and personal information, and that falls into it. We've all scanned our passport and our ID to get visas, to buy things, to get credit on a credit card. That information, anytime you upload something, anytime you take a picture on your phone, it can potentially be exposed to the internet. So if somebody has the ability to get the ID number from your passport, to get the expiration date and so forth, and you use that same passport to sign up for your phone carrier, they can then use that information to port your phone number and get into the rest of your accounts that way. All right, so this is phishing, and I will wait for this. If you haven't heard of phishing, what phishing is it's spelled PH, not with the F. it is essentially using deceptive techniques to get you to give a bad person your information, whether it is account numbers, Bitcoin addresses, phone numbers, like I said, any of that personal information you use to recover. Like you want to get, it used to be a big deal with the free sticker packs that were going around back when Smileys first started coming out. They would be like, you know, please give us your mother's maiden name for security purposes, or please give us the house you grew up on for security purposes. They didn't need that information. They just wanted to collect it for selling it on the black market, and it sells for a good deal of money. So it actually, that information sells for more than your credit card info does on the black market. This is actually from my email. I took this today. You can't really read it on here, but if you look at the presentation online, and you'll see that Google's actually attached a phishing tag to it for me because they noticed that that is what it's doing. And based on the text, you can't really read it from here, but based on the text, they're trying to steal the access to my Ethereum accounts. So I would go to this email, they'd say, hey, you know, you recently invested in our ICO. Please enter your Ethereum private keys so that we can send you your money, right? And if I'm a new user, I don't know what's going on, I'll do that. And they wouldn't be doing this if people weren't actually like falling for it. So this is, people fall for this stuff all the time. And even more so the ones that are coming up next. This next one is a different email from PayPal. It's pretty much the same thing. It says, you know, urgent, we need you, somebody's trying to hack your account, we need you to log in right away so we can verify that it's you, or verify transactions, whatever. It might be PayPal, your bank account, you know, anything, right? So if you do get an email like this, the only way to protect against it is don't click on anything. If you think you actually got hacked, go to the website yourself with your browser. Type in paypal.com. Do not click on any of the links in this email, because even if it is actually PayPal, you'll still be able to get to it by going to that way. So you're not really losing any time. You're still being able to verify it. But guaranteed, if you click on this link, you will lose money or access to your accounts, at least temporarily. So it will be, at the very least, a big hassle. And this is one that I briefly mentioned earlier, which has been a huge, huge problem for Google, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any platform that has advertisements. This has been a ridiculous big problem, which is they are, it's still not coming, oh, there it is. They are actually putting ads in that say they're for companies they're not for. And you can see, this actually says blockchain.info. That is the correct address. But because Google doesn't actually make you put the link that it goes to as the same thing that it displays. And this is very helpful if you're doing marketing, right? If I'm doing marketing, I'll put my homepage here, and it'll actually go to my lead capture page. So that is a real valuable thing we can do, but tons and tons and tons of people have been losing money to this recently. And it is a big, big problem. You'll see that when it actually goes to, when you actually click on the website, the URL that is there is spelled BOCKCHEIAN.com. Now, if you look at that closely, you might notice, but if you don't pay attention, you won't. And the website that's here, when you actually go to this website, it looks exactly like blockchain.info. And I didn't try it, but I imagine you actually can log in to blockchain.info because they don't want you to notice that you've just been hacked. They want you to go, you know, check your balance, maybe send some bits to somebody and go back on with your day so that they can get into it themselves later and have their leisure to steal whatever they want. Obviously, with this, all you have to do is not click on the ad links. There's no reason to. Just either go to the website directly or find the one that's in the search results. Google has no problem. They've been doing very, very good. They've always done a great job of keeping these kind of bad actors out of the SEO search results, but it's too hard to do with the ads. They're trying to figure out, they're getting new solutions, but it's just really difficult because somebody will actually go on the black market, buy a Google AdWord campaign that's been working well for who knows how long, doing good business for maybe months or years. They buy that account, and then they just do their bad ads on it. So it's not Google's fault, really. They are obviously very upset about it and trying to do against it. But it's a super hard thing to battle, so the answer is just don't ever click on Google Ads unless you absolutely have a good reason. And if you see an ad in Facebook or something like that, and you click on it, just be very careful to check that the URL is the one you expect. And this is not a situation where you just check the first few characters and the last few characters. You have to check every single character because, like I said, they change it. So if you want to be really secure, you turn on caps lock and re-type in the URL that was already there with caps lock on. And if they did something weird like changing I's and L's and that kind of thing, then that won't be a problem because now you're using caps lock and it would revert to the correct address. Yeah.
Clicking on a bad link doesn't matter. It's only if I log in, that's when they grab my password.
Right, exactly. Or if you sign up, because if you sign up and you're using the same password on all your websites, they now have the password that you use on all your websites.
So does it help to look for that little green lock?
It helps, but it's really easy to get. I can pay $20 or $30 and get the little green lock on any website. To get the actual secure, like where it says secure or verified, that is hard to get. But the little green lock is just a decent, like, yeah. If it says secured or verified, it's still possible, but it's very unlikely. So with this one, I imagine they had the lock. I imagine it said SSL, but I doubt it said secured or verified because that actually has a person behind it that's manually checking to make sure that those websites are doing what they say they do. The issue with that is, though, the same thing with the AdWords account, is I can get a website verified, I can make it look like a real company, and then after I've been verified, change it to this and do bad things with it. So it's a good sign, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. This is going a little bit longer. But anyway, this one is just ATMs. With ATMs, they have card skimmers on them and stuff. Two things you can do to protect against this is go to bank ATMs because their technicians actually check for this kind of thing. And at the small, like or individually owned ATMs, they don't always. And also, if you ever see me use an ATM, you will see me try and pull off the cover and try and pull off like the scanner and all that stuff. And the fact of the matter is, if I can pull it off without any tools, it's an unsecured ATM. Regardless of if it's been hacked, it's unsecured, which means it's their fault. If I can pull it off, that's a different huge problem. So don't worry about breaking the ATMs. Don't take a hammer to it or a screwdriver or anything. But definitely press around the edges of the keypad because it will pop up a little bit, or yank on the key or the card reader because it will come off if it is a skimmer. Because usually they want to make it easy to take off later because they don't have Wi-Fi. They're not usually networked, so they actually have to take the physical device and upload it to their stuff. Sometimes they network it. It just depends, but it costs more. So yeah, with the ATMs and a lot of that is just pay attention. All right. So this is the last part that I want to talk about really before we finish up, which is two-factor. And I've gone over most of this already, but I do want to go over a couple things. Two-factor authentication, there's a few different versions of it. There's the kind I was talking about where you get a text message or an email with a security code, and it says, put this code in the website to verify it's you. That is fine to use, but if it is an unsecured device, like I said, a phone number that anybody can just call and have it changed for no money at all, you know what I mean? Then that's not a secure form of two-factor. And same thing with your email. If you're using bad passwords and you're not protecting your email with another version, a secure version of two-factor, it's not a secure two-factor. So these are two apps that allow for secure two-factor. I recommend, this is kind of the same situation with KeePass and LastPass. Authy will store all of your authenticator codes on their database unless you give them the permission. They don't keep your password. That way you're not required to hold on to it or anything, and you can access it from multiple devices. With Google Authenticator, Also, same security, so on and so forth, but it's only on your phone. You can't access it from your computer, and if you don't have a proper backup of your phone, which I've done before, or I did not have a proper backup before and lost my phone, you lose access to it completely. And the reason two-factor is such a great last form of defense is if you can get it reset. If you call Google and say, hey, I lost my phone and my two-factor keys, they will reset it for you, but they put a time delay on it. They won't let you just like social engineer your way through it. And if they do, they say, great, your account will be available to you in a week, which gives, if you're being hacked, gives you plenty of time to notice, hey, I can't log into my Google account. I wonder why that is. So I would say for 99% of people, just use Authy. Authy is what I use. But don't be like a lot of people that I've seen with Authy, and they put their phone that is unsecured as the two-factor for their two-factor. So if I get a hold of your phone number or steal your phone anyway, I can just reset your Authy password and get access to it. So don't use unsecured two-factor to protect your secured two-factor. It doesn't make any sense. But use Authy. You can do secured phone two-factor. There is a way. You use a VoIP account. In the US, we use Google Voice. It's free. You can protect it with this secured form, so it's hard to hack into. But there's hundreds of free services and paid services alike. You can get free text message apps and so on and so forth that cannot be social engineered through. So you can have, for instance, my bank accounts require that I have phone two-factor on my bank accounts. They just require it. It's not an option. But obviously, I don't want to leave my bank account unsecured. So I have to use a VoIP service that I have secured myself as the backup so that I'm not using an unsecured phone for my two-factor. I know that whole bit was a little complicated. Is there questions? I don't really have time to go into the specifics of two-factor, though.
Ben, what about distributing keys? You have to have a minimum 4 out of, say, 10 out of 10 keys. You have to have 3 people that agree on you need to have your password reset.
Sure. Yeah. You can do that. Like Facebook offers that, and there are a bunch of ways you can do that. For instance, excuse me. What you're specifically talking about is really only seen in like Bitcoin wallets or that kind of thing, or like really high-end secured devices and so on and so forth. But they do allow for what's called one-time two-factor codes, which means they generate like 10 or 20 codes, and you print those out and you send them, to your mom, or you put them in a bank account, or a safety deposit box, or someplace that is safe in case you're using this form of two-factor and you lose access to it. Then you can still recover, get access. There are lots of ways to protect that. And I have added some information, like these are all more information buttons and whatnot, and there's links to how to make sure that your backups are backed up and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, what you're talking about is like essentially splitting up the key into multiple parts, which is great, but it's not really a thing that people offer yet. But I know Facebook does. Facebook allows you to put like, I don't know if it's 2 or 5 friends, that if you ever lose access to your account or you lose access to your two-factor, Facebook will contact those people, and those people are instructed to call you and make sure that you're wanting to reset and gain access to your account again. Change the defaults on everything. Don't leave your modem and router to have the default Wi-Fi name, password, and especially don't leave the default admin name and password. Because like I was talking about in the coffee shop scenario, where they get access to the admin part of the coffee shop and they just reroute all the traffic. So even if you're not stealing your information from your friends, leaving it with the default password, username and password, means that somebody could come over to fix your plumbing, look at the username and password on the bottom of your router, sell that online. Somebody online will easily buy that all day long. This happens every day. And they then start either stealing your information or using your house as a VPN, as a proxy to do things like DDoS and spam and all kinds of bad stuff you don't want happening on. So make sure you change the default username and passwords on every device you own Do not leave any default username and passwords anywhere. And yeah, keep your software up to date. And that is all I have. Took a little bit longer than I was expecting, but do we have any questions? Yeah, in the back.
Keyloggers, is there any easy way to actually scan for that on your devices?
Yes, virus scanning software does do scans for that, but there's always 0-day or exploits that just came out that day that they haven't been able to update yet for. So that and the keyloggers don't really work as well anymore, so not a lot of people use them as much. It's more the copy and paste one that you have to be worried about, and those don't actually send any information back, so they don't get caught. Does that make sense? Because keyloggers have to send information back, and that's an outbound connection that your computer probably wasn't expecting, that shows up as a huge red flag for your malware. But the copy-paste ones, what they do is they store all that information on your computer ahead of time and then just change it. And they don't ever try and access it, so there's no weird connections going in and out. So as far as the keyloggers, though, you just got to keep everything up to date, your virus protection and so on and so forth. You had the question about the security software to use. So if you have Windows 10, one of the big updates that nobody talks about for Windows 10 was that they started doing the same thing Mac has always done, which is doing a scan of the kernel, like the very root of your OS, before it started. Mac has always done this. This is one of the reasons Mac are supposed to be more secure. So if you have Windows 10, just use the basic Windows security software. That's what I use. That's what most people use. If you want something extra, Bitdefender is the best option. Do not do Kaspersky malware, or let's see, Malwarebytes is decent, but honestly, Bitdefender is the best.
What
if you
about
want. Macs, I don't really know as much about Macs, but as far as I know, there are no decent alternatives to the regular security software and malware protection. As far as I know, I can do some research and look that up and post it in the comments if you like.
And how do you get the copy and paste software on your computer? Do you have to download something, or if I just click the wrong link, can it?
So yeah, a lot of those now are browser plugins. So everybody has a ton of browser plugins now, and Chrome, Edge is doing it now, Firefox is doing it, Safari. Everybody has browser plugins, right? And so that is the most common way that kind of thing happens nowadays. However, it's not just about downloading the wrong thing. It's about keeping plugins that are too old. So there was a big issue with the guy not too long ago that actually bought up tons and tons of out-of-date or unused, where the original developers decided to not support it anymore. And he was just going around and buying them all up. And he bought up hundreds of them. And nobody noticed. And because why would they? He's claimed he looked into it and did his research and didn't do anything wrong right out. And then in batches, he started releasing malware on these plugins that people already have. And they just forgot about it.
So when they updated, they got them.
Exactly. And because it's been on the store for 5 or 10 years, or because it's been around for a while, Google doesn't, they check, but they don't check well enough, and so on and so forth. So that honestly is the biggest way, the easiest way you can get malware today. But yeah, still going to bad websites, downloading the wrong thing. For instance, don't turn on the function on your browser that saves the download location, because it automatically downloads things. You want it to pop up every single time, because that way it has to pop up every single time. So even if you do go to a bad website that does want to download something to your computer, it'll just pop up and you're like, I didn't ask to download anything, and you cancel it. So that's the easiest way to defend against that. More questions in the back.
Yes, in case I use Linux, and I suppose that I got into some bad website that I later on realized that. So what should I do? What steps should I take to re-secure my computers or scan for any vulnerable things happens in my computer.
Sure. Okay, and that's a really good question, and it brings up another thing, which is you need to think about that in every situation, or in at least a few situations. If you're going to start using password database managers and Authy, which is another, it's two-factor authentication database manager. If you're going to start using these things, you have to think about all the scenarios. So what happens, for instance, if I find out Dropbox gets exposed and all my, my everything in my Dropbox is now potentially exposed? Or what happens if my phone was stolen or my computer was broken and then my phone was stolen? Because if you have things on only 2 devices and they both break or they both get stolen at the same time, that's an eventuality you have to plan for. For instance, I have my phone and my computer with me. If I were to fall and break them, or somebody was to hold me up at gunpoint and steal them both, I have a contingency plan so that I can gain access to all my stuff again by, within 10 hours or 12 hours. Specifically answering your question, what do you do? So if you're not using the same password everywhere and you don't believe your database was exposed, so if your database was exposed, you have to get a new device, pretty much, or at least completely wipe everything and reset every password. If you're not using the same password on every site and you only think, hey, I went to this blockchain fake site and my blockchain password was exposed, and you're doing proper password management and you have 2-factor set up, you just go in, change your blockchain password, and it's done.
One reason I don't use LastPass is that it really just works for username and password. But if you want to store securely your challenges and how you answer certain questions and so on. So it's not just that specific.
Sure. So LastPass allows for a note section that you can store all that stuff in. And that is what I do with some of my information like that. But obviously it's not a great idea to store all that information there. If it's something you need regular access to, you could do a different password management service, like having LastPass and KeePass, and having 2 separate databases, and one you store one thing, and the other you store the other thing. KeePass is very changeable. So you can change it to do all kinds of different encryptions. You can change it to store all kinds of different information. And then obviously, if you don't have to access that information, if you're thinking about in the eventuality of my death, having people be able to access my accounts, then that's where you write it down or print it out and send it to your lawyer or put it in a safety deposit box or send it to family, that kind of thing. More questions?
One final question.
Anything about crypto? Do you think Ledger and the hardware wallets is the best, safest option there?
It is not the safest option. The safest option is paper wallets, but to actually make paper wallets safer than Ledger, you have to have it on a computer. You have to generate the wallets on a computer that's never been attached to the internet and never will be attached to the internet. So if you're not willing to do that, and you're not willing to exchange paper wallets all the time, which is a ridiculous hassle. I was one of the first people to do. I worked for Armory Enterprise, which was setting up business solutions for storing wallets on paper wallets and stuff like that. It was a huge pain in the butt. So when we're talking about that triangle of ease versus functionality versus security, I think the best option is those hardware wallets, but you still have to maintain a paper backup in a separate location in case of fire, in case of theft, so on and so forth. And honestly, when we come down to this whole question of security and how we can protect ourselves, these ways that we're talking about protecting ourselves is from people that we don't know or people in other countries, people that aren't willing to show their face. At the end of the day, any mobster can come at you with a bat and torture you and threaten you until you give up your password. And it doesn't matter what you've done then. You could have the most secure system in the world, but if they're threatening your life to get your password, what are you going to do?
Okay, one last question, Ben. Can you just briefly talk about the importance of VPNs? What are they?
Okay, so VPNs are the best way to think about it is a secure bridge or tunnel between where you are and where the VPN you're using is hosting their server. So the one that I mentioned before, private internet access, and actually they gave us some keys. You have those. Did you figure out a way to distribute those? Okay, so they gave us like 30 free months of private internet access, which is the one I use. I recommend it to everybody. But the VPN is essentially a bridge or a private tunnel between you and their server. So it encrypts it on your computer, and then it goes through the through the Wi-Fi. It's encrypted while it's in the air. It's encrypted until it reaches the router. The router sends it encrypted onto the internet, which gets routed through 100 servers until it gets to theirs, and then it gets decrypted and goes out to the internet. That way, you are more protected from all those people in between. Potentially, somebody could be the man in the middle between your VPN server and the place you're trying to get to. But obviously, companies like Private Internet Access, like AirVPN, all those guys, they spend a lot of time making sure that doesn't happen because that is their business. And as with all the other experts that I was talking about, they're in the dark places of the internet where those services for man-in-the-middle attacks are sold and bartered and bought. So they know a lot more than I will know or you will know about that because they have full-time people on it. So a VPN is essentially a bridge of encryption between you and the rest of the world.
Thank you, Ben. Can we all please have a big round of applause for Ben, please?
Thank you. So let's just finish off now. Okay, thank you. Have a good night. Thank you.